So my name is Craig McInnes. I'm the co-CEO of myCaribou, and it's a global platform for finding and managing partners. So very excited to cover this topic. I know in my discussions with manufacturers and distributors all over the world, I just came back from Medtech. I was at Medical Fair Asia back in September, and there still is a massive problem in failure rates in these partnerships. So the thesis here is that relationships between manufacturers and distributors start with great expectations and enthusiasm, but often these partnerships fail, resulting in lost revenue, lost time, and lost ground to competitors. And what we want to tackle today are some ways to avoid these pitfalls and ensure that your investment in your partnerships pays off. I'm just going to share a quick analogy, I guess, for you, but in conversations that I've had over the last many years and with manufacturers and distributors, if I say to them typically, if I had to guess about your distribution partners or your supplier partners, roughly a third of them would be great partnerships that are succeeding. About a third need some help, and a third of them you likely need to replace and replace soon. And I've yet to have anybody push back on that. You could argue the percentages a little bit, but that's a massive failure rate, and we really want to help solve that with today's presentation. Really excited to introduce today's panel. We've got two from the manufacturing side, one from the distribution side, which I think is an excellent mix. So I'm going to start first with Hakeem Adebiyi. So he's a chief commercial officer with Hegenberger Medical. Hakeem has been leading medtech organizations commercially for 28 years. His export journey started in 2014, and using all of his commercial expertise, he managed to deliver exponential growth internationally, which helped in the business being acquired twice during his tenure. His success is down to his simple, no-nonsense approach to business and specifically building strong distributor/exporter relationships. So thank you, Hakeem, for joining us. Second, we have Paul Hoff, who is the International Sales Manager with Hakeem Frame, and has also over 20 years experience managing distribution channels in healthcare while optimizing and growing business relationships globally. Currently, Paul is responsible for the global growth and business development for Hakeem Frame, an innovative French manufacturer of high-quality ambulatory solutions for various hospital services. Paul has successfully doubled sales in past roles by penetrating new growth markets and successfully onboarding new distributors. Speaking of the distribution side, we have Serge Roller with us today with Somapharm. He's an experienced medtech sales professional for one of the fastest growing Swiss medtech distributors. As a leader for Somapharm, Serge is responsible for building and managing successful partnerships with leading urology, gynecology, gastroenterology, and general surgical products from around the world. His past experience includes Johnson & Johnson, and we will provide contact information at the end here for Hakeem, Paul, Serge, and myself. I will just note it from an administrative point of view, please feel free to ask questions as we go in the Q&A panel. I am really excited to mention that we initially planned this webinar around some questions that we put together, and we had such a great response from people that signed up. We had dozens and dozens of questions in advance. And so what we did is actually took those questions, organized them under sort of 4 pillars of success. And so the questions we're addressing today are your questions. And we will also offer an opportunity, of course, for you to ask questions as we go. So we're going to cover off really 4 key areas with approximately 14 questions. So it's going to be a fairly tight agenda. We'll move quickly. But again, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to do so and put those in the Q&A panel. So we're going to talk about market discovery. We're going to talk about finding and selecting partners, laying the foundation for a great partnership, and partner management and collaboration as those 4 pillars for successful collaborative partnerships globally. So I'm going to start first with to what extent do manufacturers need to understand new markets before they decide to enter the market? What should a market analysis include? And Paul, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Thanks, Craig, and welcome everybody. I'll dive straight in. Time's against us. I think the first thing I would say is there's a minimum that you need to do, but I don't think you need to get so bogged down in this part of it, as long as you've identified a distributor who is an expert in that market. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be doing the daily grind of accessing the right people and generating your growth in that market. So I don't think you need to be 100% knowledgeable about every single market that you go into. It's also not practical. So I think don't get so bogged down in thinking I need to be an absolute expert in every single market I'm going to go into, because you won't have the bandwidth to actually manage all of that in the first place. But some of the things you should be looking at, there are some things which I think are I guess, more obvious than others. The first things are our general markers of demographics. If you're looking to go into Europe, you are going to be a little bit guided by population size and healthcare spend. You're not going to spend the same amount of resource looking into Germany with a population of 80 something million as you are in Estonia, where I think it's 1.3 million. Sorry to pick on Estonia, but you know, that's how it goes. You're just not going to want to allocate the same resource, I think, for obvious reasons. So once you've looked at those general metrics of how you're going to go into a market, and you've looked at the size of the market, you need to also be looking at the healthcare system in any particular market. Is it public? Is it private? Is it a combination of the two? And to what extent? Because that will determine payment, how that market actually works for you. Also within that, whether there are any buying groups. So in some markets, there are particularly large organizations that might have a group of hospitals all working under the same umbrella. So how does that look? That's something to be looking at. I do think you should also not lose sight of regulatory aspects. Is the path to going into that market actually quite hard from a regulatory perspective? Because that will involve time and cost. A couple more payments. How does that market pay? Because that will impact your distributor's ability to pay you on time. Fundamentally important. If it's going to take you 12 months to get paid, maybe not be quite such a high priority. And then another good guideline would be to look at your competitors. And if they're already active in a market, that would tend to suggest that there's a good reason to be also exploring that market. So hopefully there's a few key points in there. Craig?
Excellent. Hakeem, Serge, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think Paul's covered it. My simple philosophy is always I look at potential and probability, which is exactly what Paul's done there. So you look at your own specific market, you look at what's the potential, and Paul talks about obviously population and those sorts of things. So, you know, if you go in there, is there a lot of business in there, and you're then comparing those to other markets to determine which market you want to go into. And then probability, as Paul just said, the softer things like well, I say soft, but anyway, the softer things such as regulatory, payment, stability of government, healthcare spend cycles, that sort of stuff. So I always try and take those two chunks and then compare each market on those two parameters, and then that will help me decide you know, what markets I need to go into.
Excellent. And Serge, the second question here, to extend from what we just talked about, I think in your role as a distributor will be really helpful to hear your take on this. What role does this analysis that Paul and Hakeem have described, what role does this analysis take in terms of helping the manufacturer and a distributor agree on pricing, the competitive landscape, and other market dynamics, such as reimbursement models, purchasing dynamics, etc.? So do you want to tackle that one, Serge?
Yeah, sure, of course. Thank you for having me here tonight. And actually, yeah, I totally joining my colleague from the OEM manufacturer point of view. And I would add that actually it's probably impossible for a manufacturer having deeper knowledge of each market, of each country you want to go, you want to go to and implement his product. I think on this base, on this level, he is actually relies on a distributor or a series of distributor, which I am assuming shall know their market.
Mhm.
And actually, it's a sharing about what is the market potential there, what are the timing, all elements mentioned by my colleagues are totally right. I mean, the potential, the access, the compliance, the regulation, and then the distributor will probably, let's say, add some flesh to the bone. So the bone is might be the interest of, okay, we should go into that market, and then based on the information of the distributor, then they could be meeting on a bridge on this one. So actually, the impacts about doing enough research and the role about that, if a manufacturer is doing enough, well, I experienced in the last 6 years actually that some are too poor, just basing like, okay, I'm talking now from maybe Switzerland or some other European country, and in a constellation where the manufacturer would be on another continent without having the knowledge or presence on European soil. So in this context, I think they heard probably, okay, Europe might be well and the spend per capita, per person, per country might be in a higher rank worldwide. That might be okay, an element of the equation. And then doing enough research will be actually crucial. So the analysis here is, in my eyes, looking back and actually currently as well and in the future, this analysis, a joint analysis between distributor and the OEM is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, it's certainly something I've heard because I speak to both sides of that coin all the time, and the distributors appreciate the manufacturer coming in with some knowledge of the market, with an understanding of regulatory, with understanding of how procurement works, et cetera, reimbursement models, and then to lean on that distributor really to help with a much deeper dive into that market. So let's move into the next one here. So I'm just going to bring this, we're to the next section. I'll bring this up on the screen. So finding and selecting partners. And on this one, I'm going to start with Hakeem. So very simple up front. How do you go about finding new partners, distributors and or suppliers? Obviously, you're looking predominantly for distributors today, but how do you go about finding new partners?
Thank you, Craig. Yeah, so it's an interesting question because it just says new partners. It doesn't necessarily say good partners, does it? So if you just want to find a new partner, go to Medica, go to Arab Health, go to any of these places, and you'll get loads of people coming up to you, telling you how they can sell your products. They can sell millions of it by, within 3 months, and then it'll be a country you've never heard of and never thought of going into, and then you'll give it to them, and then you'll probably see how badly it goes wrong very quickly. If you're looking for a good partner, what I'd suggest is that you need to know what you're looking for, and that comes down to the analysis that we just talked about and understanding the research you've done. So you need to understand the market, but that then allows you to understand the exact type of partner you're looking for, because just because someone's a good partner for one product does not mean they're a good partner for you. So you don't. My view is you don't just always look for the biggest player. You're looking for, I understand this market, therefore I need these sorts of partners, and then you can start to triage based on that. And whenever I'm looking for a partner, and anyone who works with me, we treat it basically like an interview. So if you're interviewing an individual for a job, you wouldn't just let someone turn up and then give them the job. You'd actually have a criteria that you want to go through, that you're looking for. This is the job I need them to do, so this is what I need from those individuals. So we would speak to people at DIT who do lots of research for you, and actually it can help you there. Obviously, it'd be remiss of me on a myCaribou webinar not to say that we also use myCaribou, obviously, and that's worked very, very effectively actually for us this year specifically. And you then, what I would say, you need some evidence of what they've actually done. I think my mum used to always say to me, self-praise is no praise. And just because they come and say, yes, we're fantastic, doesn't mean they are. So I always look for references. You try to find out what they've done, specifically in your space, ideally. So if you're launching a new product, you want to understand how they launched, what products have they launched before. If it's a product which is actually just replacing something else on the market, you want to look at, are they capable of doing that? So again, it's very much understanding what it is you want them to do and how you want them to achieve it, and then making sure that you identify those people and effectively interview them is what I do. And then the last part of that, I would say, is you put a strong distribution agreement in place with targets, obligations, etc., probation periods, because I think that then mitigates a lot of the challenges that we'll probably talk about as we move through. Because if you've got a very clear idea of what both your obligations are, what you want them to achieve, how you're going to support them, what they're going to do, then it's much easier when you're having conversations and reviews that you know whether somebody's doing well, they're not doing well, why they're not doing well, and what you can do to support them.
Perfect. So it's a great segue into the second question in this pillar, which is for Paul. What criteria should we use to qualify, screen a potential distributor or supplier for a good fit?
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, I think there are some, for me, key things we're going to look at in here. I think we should not forget compliance and some form of quality system. And I say that in our increasingly, MDR, regulatory heavy world that we live in. It's not your responsibility necessarily as a manufacturer to be able to recall every single product, but you need to know that your distributor is also competent to manage any regulatory or quality requirement in their own individual market. So I think that's quite important. I would be looking at their product portfolio. As Hakeem's already mentioned, it's got to be relevant or synergistic with your brands. If it has no relevance to what you're doing, I would question whether that's the right person to be working with. It's also to do with the contact points within a hospital or organization that they're dealing with. If they've already got similar products, I think it's a fair assumption to make that they've already got relationships with the relevant departments where you want your products to go to. So that's something I think you should be looking for. Evidence, I agree with Hakeem fully. I would always look to some of their other principles. As part of that interview process, if you see that they're proud that they've worked with another supplier, complementary supplier, not necessarily competing, for 10 years, call them up, find the person and say, what's the situation with these guys? Do they do a good job for you? Those references from other suppliers, peers in your position, people are pretty open, I find, in providing that sort of information. So don't hesitate to ask those questions. And then the sales team itself, I think, of course, the starting point is how many salespeople they might have, but maybe sometimes people overlook is how many products does each salesperson look after? Because if it's more than 3 or 4, I would question how they're going to actually manage, effectively representing those brands. And that also goes for the distributor itself. It's not a binding rule, but I think it's fair to say that a distributor who has a catalogue of thousands of products is never going to be proactively managing to be an expert in all of those products. And I've certainly always had more success with distributors who are focused, who might only have a small range of products, but who are experts within those product ranges. So that's what I would be looking to do. And then the biggest criteria for me then is the willingness to commit to targets, objectives, and sign up to contracts. If that's something which is already an issue in those early negotiations or interview stage, then that might also ring some alarm bells for you. as to their capability to actually deliver. So those are some of the things I'd be looking at.
Excellent. I saw Hakeem nodding on several of those comments. I think this seems to be some sharing of similar thoughts on this. I had an interesting conversation this morning with a European manufacturer, and we talked, actually, Paul, part of what you described was product categories can be complementary, but what we call call point synergies. So do they have the relationships with the right buyer? If they sell into a particular department of a hospital, do they have those relationships? If they sell into long-term care facilities, do they have those relationships? So it's not just, are they synergistic in terms of products, but is it synergistic in terms of their selling relationships? So I'll pivot to the third question here. And this one, I paraphrase a little bit from the question that came in on this, but and they actually overlapped. A couple different people had a similar question. But the question here is low cost, low tech products versus high cost, high tech products. It could be either of those, obviously. Can distributors successfully pay attention to both? What is the impact on finding and selecting the right distribution partner? And for this one, we'll ask Serge to chime in.
That's an excellent question, actually making a great link to the previous one. In my opinion, I would start generally high level by saying that it depends probably on more factors, but I see two main factors. The first one would be, what is the nature of the problem or the nature of the opportunity? And the second one is actually your maturity about analytics and key drivers. If you have, I will speak about distributor point of view. We are managing data at the end, bottom line. We are a hub. So based on this, I think how agile you are and how good you are with your data management, information and wisdom and value you can extract from this information, keyword CRM, for example, or other BI, business intelligence tools, I guess you could pay attention to high tech, high costs, and in parallel, low cost, low tech. But this requires a granularity in your maturity, which is quite deep, with the proper know-how, skills, people, and tools.
Excellent. So let's, I'm just trying to keep an eye on time. We do have a lot of questions to get through. So I'm going to move into the next pillar, which is laying the foundation for a great partnership. So we want to cover off some key aspects here. And again, these are questions from the audience in advance of today's presentation. So can you, this one, I think we'll start with Hakeem. Hakeem, can you speak to a specific example of a great manufacturer-distributor partnership in your business or your business experience, and what made it such a success? I think you're muted.
Correct. First one of the afternoon. Yeah, the example I think that was a Dutch distributor of ours, and we started working with them back in 2014, I think, and they were like a two-man band. Started off very small, and then grew exponentially to be our biggest and best distributor actually over a 5 or 6 year period. And I think that the bedrock for that comes from open and honest communication is the first thing, even when you're discussing difficult things. And that's probably why it was a Dutch distributor, because anyone who's worked with the Dutch will accept and understand that the Dutch are very straight and direct. And so am I actually. So we automatically got on very well. But also it means that there's no misunderstandings, because they'll tell you if they're not happy with something. They're not going to try and couch it in a nice word. They'll just tell you, we don't think this is very good, and you shouldn't be doing that, etc. So I think having open and honest communication and being able to discuss everything, even when it's difficult, I think is important. Having a good professional relationship, even if you're not best friends, I think is important, so that you have a mutual respect. And then, in terms of this distributor, what was really good is that they accepted that they weren't the experts and we were, so they were very keen to actually take training on board. So we did a lot of training with them. They really listened. They really were always chasing up for more information, and there was a really good feedback loop with that distributor. And we had regular check-ins and visits. So we became very much like partners. So it wasn't like we would just always go over there. We would go over there. They would come over to the UK as well. So we were interchanging information, and we then used to utilize them for our other distributors as well to share best practice. And I think that most of that was because we had a common purpose. And as Paul and myself were saying earlier, if you know what you're looking for, you've analysed the market, you've got the right, and you've looked at the right things, you tend to have a common purpose. Because if you're going in one direction, and your other distributor or your distributor is going in a different direction, i.e., I want you to sell my capital equipment and they're leasing it. Well, if they're leasing it, then I haven't got a common purpose, because they're going to be wanting to lease it over 5 or 6 years, whereas I want you to buy new equipment every week or every month. So you need to make sure that your business models are aligned. And I think that you know, as much as you can, in my own opinion, if you can have fun and have that personal relationship with your distributor, that makes everything much better. So even when I've moved from where I was to here, there's certain distributors who I know can do the same, or the products that I've moved to, and because we've got a good relationship with them, they will then move across and they'll start selling that product, and I've already got that relationship. So I think it's that mutual respect and a common purpose really are the bedrocks of any distributor relationship, and that was certainly the bedrock of this distributor relationship, which led to such a great success over the years.
Awesome. And it actually leads well into this. This question came in, and again, multiple versions of this. So exclusivity, what are the pros and cons of an exclusive relationship between a manufacturer and distributor in a particular market? And which scenarios would normally indicate that exclusivity is necessary or important? And I'm going to ask Paul to answer this one.
So I think this is for me, it's a fundamental thing which underpins the work that you've done in the first place. Because if you've done your due diligence and you've done your interview process and you're comfortable with that, you've got the right people, you're going to want to tie them to something exclusive, because you don't want them to go and sell your competitor's product. But looking at it from their side, from a distributor's perspective, I think it also comes down to the investment that they're going to have to make. So if you have them tied into your brand exclusively, they also know that whatever efforts they make, particularly in a startup phase, because it's never an instant thing if you're introducing a new product to any market. You've got to build up awareness, brand awareness, possibly if the brand's not known, and then you're going to see the fruits of their particular labor. Maybe 6 months, maybe 12 months down the line, you're really going to start to see things picking up. So I guess the point is, will a distributor be as keen to make all of those efforts without anything that's going to reassure and comfort them that someone else can't come in and basically piggyback on the back of that and take away that business? Because that's also a reality. So I think having it tied to an exclusivity should, if it's the right company, it should encourage those efforts to be made. Another thing with that is that you can be very clear around the objectives and sales targets that you're setting them, not just those sales targets, demo stock requirements, anything and everything. If you've got something where you're mutually contracted to work together on an exclusive basis, then you can be, I think, a little bit more forthright in terms of your expectations. If it's a more classic buy and sell situation where you buy some stuff from me, becomes a little bit harder, I think, at that point to impose any kind of rules or regulations that you want them to stick to. I guess the only downside of that is that if you make that exclusive relationship and things don't pan out so well, you have effectively tied up that market. So you could be then, in a situation where you've got no sales or low sales, and you've got something there to have a problem with. I think we'll probably bounce back to that one a little bit further. I know there's another question relating to contracts, but I think I can cover that there as well. And the scenario where that exclusivity is really important, I guess, is also where there's a cost in the first place, and that could be registration of products where there's going to be an upfront investment. Again, our distributor's going to be as keen to do that without some kind of reassurance that they've got a period of time to actually get the return on their investment. So that, I think, is where we are with exclusivity.
Well, it's a great segue into, there we go. Great segue into this next question, which is, it's a bit long, but I wanted to keep it the way it was because I think the person that asked this question actually phrased it really well. So bear with me for a second on this one. A successful partnership requires the distributor to invest in developing the market through people, infrastructure, inventory, promotion, and education. But the payback, and this is really to Paul's last point, the payback on this investment could take a long time and manufacturers become impatient. How can both the manufacturer and distributor mitigate this risk so they are committed to successfully investing capital and resources in the partnership and looking forward over a longer term? So long question, a lot there, but I think it really nicely sums up the challenge. I'm going to ask Hakeem to answer this one.
Yeah, no, it's always the question that people are thinking, and when you're writing a distribution agreement, it's often the bone of contention, right? So how much money are you going to give us? Are you going to co-fund going to Medtech and all these other events? We've got this stand meeting. Are you going to pay for it? I think going back to one of the earlier questions, it's about getting the right distributor in the first place and making sure that you've got aligned visions and that you understand the market. And that you know what you both believe can be achieved in that market. And my view is I'm quite mercenary when it comes to this sort of thing. If I can see that our visions are aligned, I move on to somebody else, because otherwise you're just going to have a lot of problems further down the line. So if I think the market's 50 million and they're telling me the market's 1 million, and I think they can get 2 million in the next year, and they think they can do 100,000, then you're always going to have problems because they're not going to want to invest as much as I'm expecting them to invest. So I think it's having that aligned vision that you've agreed on, and you've all agreed that we've done the analysis. This is what we think the market can do. So based on what we think the market can do, then these are the things that need to be done. And that comes, in my opinion, through the DA as well. Once you've done that analysis, because then you've got in there what can be achieved in what time frame, and what is the investment that both parties feel is needed into that market. And then you start looking at, okay, so what can we as a manufacturer support with? This is what's required. Who's going to pay for that? The manufacturer may pay for this, and the actual distributor may pay for other things. So it shouldn't be, in my opinion, when you've got a partnership, that you're just saying, well, right, we're going to sell you the product, as Paul said, it's a partnership. We sell you the product, you just get on and sell it, and then we'll have nothing more to do with it, and we'll come back to you in 6 months and see how you're doing, or a year. So I think that's the key, and I think both parties need to show commitment, i.e. they will, as Paul said, invest in stock up front. We may help with marketing materials and different things at conferences, and then you've got field visits, training, and lots of other stuff that the manufacturers, because that's what a misconception sometimes that a distributor may have, is that actually we're spending loads of money and you've not invested anything. Well, yeah, you have, because we've actually developed the product, we've gone through the regulatory process, we've spent a truckload of cash before we've given it to you, and we're going to continue in training, field visits, support, etc. And then the other thing that we've done quite successfully, and this comes when you've got deeper partnerships and you've been doing it for some time, we've actually co-funded some, like whether it's a product manager or a salesperson who's going to specifically focus on that product. And that's when you're getting really into deep partnerships. And we've done that in markets where of a significant size, where we know that this is going to make a difference, because then you've effectively got our own person in there who's going to really drive it forward. And I think that then shows our level of investment as well as the distributor's level investment.
Excellent. Angela, I'm going to skip the poll for now just to keep on pace here, but I know Angela's monitoring the time as well here. So I'm going to move to Serge on this one. So what are some of the key metrics, and Hakeem started to touch on this, but what are some of the key metrics beyond just revenue? Revenue is obviously the trailing indicator that you think are important to establish at the onset of the relationship. For example, for a number of presentations to doctors, lining up key opinion leaders, product trials in hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. What are the key metrics, Serge, from your perspective?
Key metrics. I see a nuance between metrics or key metrics and all the activities, presentation to physician, doctors, trials, promotion. These are, in my opinion, justified activity that have to intervene at some point during the sales life cycle, or the sales cycle. I would put the focus and the spotlight actually on. I'm realizing more and more that between manufacturer and distributor, the main focus is put on the what, being the product, being a plan, being a timeline, whatever. And I would suggest also to invest some time about the how. I mean, if we have a communication on the what, and you get out of the what, like a meta communication, you extract yourself and you have a discussion about how are we gonna do what we want to do together. So having an equilibrium, a balance between the what and the how, in my opinion, this is genuine and healthy sign or metrics in this context for having the condition for a success. So not only about the what, but also, okay, how are we gonna decide? How are we gonna put this in place? With what resource, with what rhythm of communication, review? And completing this question and building up or reacting to what Hakeem just said, he pretty hit it on the nail, actually. I just would like to add the following. Which is actually the traditional model has been the manufacturer train the research, the distributor, and then the sales of the distributor go to market. This is some most traditional model I have seen. I have also experienced another model, which is actually the manufacturer who is the specialist about his product. He equips with the minimum knowledge or enough knowledge that resource from a distributor can go to the market and talk to eyes, to the doctor, to the nurse, to the medicine guy who is taking charge of the maintenance, having just the minimum of knowledge, and then to make the customer attracted, see the opportunity, solve a problem, improve efficiency, improve effectivity. And then when it comes to a trial, when it comes to a demo, whatever, then the OEM, the manufacturer, provides some clinical trainer or a specialist. And this shows actually the customer how the distributor and the manufacturer can work together in a sequenced way of the sales, which even sends even more stronger signals and positive healthiness about the collaboration between the providers and the customer.
Got it. Excellent. So let's switch gears a little bit here to contract terms. This is a two-part question. I'm going to ask Paul to answer it. What are some of the key contract terms that you believe should be in all contracts? And there's a sort of a secondary question, and again, this came from a participant today, is with the rising supply chain costs in the current market, is it reasonable to add some sort of consumer price index driven, inflation driven adjustment clauses to contracts? So Paul, we'll ask you to answer that one.
Yeah, sure. So let's just hit it straight off then. Key contract terms for all contracts. It comes back to the whole thing of getting it nailed down from the start. And I'm a big believer that the more you have down in black and white, the less confusion or chance there can be that then there's a problem further down the line. So if you haven't set up any measures in the first place, is it reasonable to then question someone if they're failing, if they don't even know what the measures are? So I think we should be looking at the term. 3 years maybe is a sort of a standard distribution term. We're going to be looking at payment terms, always can be a sticky one. The territory itself, are they having coverage over a whole market or just a region? Again, if you've got multiple distributors in a territory, it's, I think, really important to have that clarity, because you don't want to have a situation of someone selling on someone else's patch. Scope of products, and again, having that spelled out from the start. If it's a full range, at Hakeem we have over 50 products, and I don't believe that a single distributor would be able to sell all of them, and indeed I probably wouldn't expect or want them to. So which product ranges are they selling? Then in terms of the product registration is an interesting one. So if in the territory there is a regulatory requirement to have the products or the brand registered, whose name is that under? And I'm thinking of a specific example where I experienced where the agreement was signed up and the distributor went to all the trouble and the cost of getting the registration process done, which was quite onerous in Brazil. And then there was a change of ownership somewhere down the line. And at that point, it becomes quite a sticky thing to say, well, is our product registered, or is it you as the local distributor who were authorized to import that product? So giving yourself the ability to transfer ownership of regulatory or product registrations is a really good one. And then also change of ownership of the actual company. So if you have a distribution agreement and then your distributor sells their business to one of your competitors, if you don't have a clause in there around what would happen in that scenario, again, you're in a difficult situation. Sales targets, and importantly, consequences of non-achievement. And this is when I'm now segueing back to the point around exclusivity, is that the downside of having an exclusive agreement is that you then are effectively blocked in a market with no sales. That's why you need to put it in the agreement in the first place, that if sales targets are not met, either exclusivity is lost or indeed distribution is terminated if it's something that's not then resolved or steps aren't put in place to improve the situation. So those are the things that I would absolutely want to have nailed down. In terms of the cost point, I would look at that under the general T's and C's of trading, and I think it's not unusual to have clauses around price increases. Typically, it could be 30 days notice, 90 days notice. But I would look at protecting myself from any market forces or supply chain costs which are going to impact things. Again, you'd have that spelled out as a clause in there as well. So that's how I would manage that.
Great, a lot of ground covered there. I will just reiterate for everyone, we will send a recording of this afterwards as well as the deck. And any questions we don't get to, we'll provide a response to, because we do have lots of questions coming in as we speak here as well. So, all right, moving to the fourth pillar, which is the partner management and collaboration piece. I don't want to rush through this because it's so important. Is even if you pick the right partner and you understood the market and laid the foundation beautifully, it still comes down to execution, management, collaboration between the partners. So, Hakeem, maybe just a quick thought on how often should business reviews take place? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly? Is it annually? Maybe it changes. And what do you think are the most important items to discuss here?
I'll take the second bit first, actually, and then I'll move into how often.
Perfect.
So I think Paul's just come off talking about exactly what you put in the contract. So those are the key things that you're going to be discussing in terms of your sales versus your targets. You know, what's your pipeline development like? You know, what new accounts have you got? What are your stock holdings? You know, what are the sales into the market? Because it's not just about how much have I sold to you. For you to really understand the health of your business, it's what's that distributor selling into the market on a regular basis. You know, and then, you know, looking at objections that they're coming up with and objection handling. And I think that I would expect, in terms of frequency of those things, it's almost like just managing any aspect in your business. It almost just morphs into one, because I would expect that my distributors in their own business would be doing some kind of monthly report for their own business. So I want to have access to that monthly report. There might be a few other things that I want from them, but you try to make sure it's not too onerous so that people aren't doing things twice, so that you try to work together and say, right, what are the things we need? What are you currently doing? Well, all right, let's just use what you're doing and add on these two things. So I'd always expect a monthly report and probably, you know, a light touch in terms of, you know, you probably have a call with them following the monthly report, just as, you know, so people know, yeah, I'm happy, I'm not happy, they've got questions, they've got queries. So again, going back to that, having an open, honest communication. Quarterly, you can do, but I'll just do that as part of your I would expect that I would be going on field visits, or somebody from the company would be going on field visits at least once a quarter, and that's when they would then pick up any things outside of the monthly report, and then you'd include some, you know, update training as and when necessary in that face-to-face. And then annually, then you're going to have an in-depth review of the success, failures, improvements to be made, etc. So I think it just becomes one continuum there, whereby rather than saying, right, this is now an official quarterly review, well, we're having a monthly review anyway, effectively with the monthly report, and then an annual review is just standard, and then the quarterly is just fitted in as and when you're in the market.
Perfect. One thing I'd add from my perspective is just that, you know, obviously revenue or sales is a trailing indicator, and those other metrics that Hakeem has described and Paul described are leading indicators that will, so you're not surprised by either an influx of sales or a dip in sales, because you're in touch with those leading indicators, whatever they might be in your case. All right, so let's, I'm going to ask Serge on this one. Just a fairly quick, because we're starting to run out of time here, but how do we keep distributors' sales force engaged, Serge? You know, so that they're paying attention to my product and selling it in that market. What are your thoughts there?
I keep them engaged actually with support, with example. I mean, I go and sell myself first all the products, experimenting the whole thing, what makes, and I share my success. I even share even more my failures. Failure is part of the success process, I think. And together, actually, in this way, sharing is caring. We have, of course, our metrics based on manufacturer targets, if there are any. I have some manufacturers actually that don't want any targets. He says, you are the distributor, you know markets, you have access, and you have to your customers, you have your network. And they give totally freedom of action based on trust for objectives of a mutual interest. What's good for them is good for me, and what's good for me will be anyway good for them. So coming back to the resources itself, actually with proper incentive, with proper education and time as well, just enough that they don't feel overwhelmed with one shot, 2 days extreme education, and then you wouldn't hear anything, and then, okay, it might work a couple of weeks, and then the know-how might flew out somehow. And then if you want to keep them motivated on there, and that making also the link with the answer of Hakeem, which is totally right. Also, in my opinion, it's about the sharing. Where are we? Where are we having success? Where are we pain points? And to have the honesty to say also, oh, here I am struggling. I need your help. Here was a recommendation, or here is what I need. And having this collaboration, this discussion, this dialogue continues based on need to know, then I guess is a part of the success.
Excellent. I think what we just talked about in terms of those leading indicators, those metrics that you're managing to would be a red flag if you're losing engagement with your partner. That if the numbers have dipped from a leading indicator perspective, that would be a sign of that. We just have 2 questions left from the audience questions, and then some are coming in as well. I'm going to ask this one of Paul. And this is one that is a bit of a pain point, bit of a sore spot for a lot of people. But on the distribution side, so how can distributors mitigate the risk of the manufacturer going direct in the market? And I can tell you, I have heard this one obviously many, many times in interactions with distributors. So Paul, we'll give you that easy question to tackle.
Thanks for that. The cynic in me says you can't. No, I think in all seriousness, I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, why do manufacturers want to work with distributors in the first place? And the cost of going direct in any market, and particularly of having then to manage that market, if we've talked about the idiosyncrasies and complexities of different markets, does a manufacturer want to have all of those pain points? If you're doing a good job and you're developing all the things that we've talked about, and as Hakeem has referred to, and I absolutely endorse, is that as you build and develop and deepen that partnership, that's the best way for me that you will mitigate that risk. Because if you make it enjoyable for the manufacturer to actually have those transactions and you're delivering, there's not going to be the appetite to want to come and pull the rug from underneath you. And yeah, I think it's of course there's always that element there where it could happen, but the closer you are in your collaboration, there's an element then of human nature that says that's going to be less likely, I guess. That's as much as I've got for you on that one, Craig.
No, that's perfect. And it's funny, I mentioned earlier about the a third, where I talk to manufacturers or distributors and they say a third of their partnerships are amazing, a third need work, and a third need to be completely overhauled or replaced. That first group of really successful partnerships, if I ask them the follow-up question, which is how many of those are you looking to change or go direct, it's almost none. It's none. Right? They're worried about the other places where they're not succeeding. So, okay, last question. This one's for Hakeem. Let me just quickly share the last one on the screen here. And as I'm doing that, please feel free to add additional questions to the Q&A. We won't get to all of them, but we will actually follow up with answers to all this in our follow-up. So last question. Hakeem, how do you know when it's time to end a failing relationship? Oh, you're muted, Hakeem, sorry.
Yeah, I thought it's kind of like a failing marriage. You just know at the end of the day. I mean, and I think if you've done all the things that we've just been talking through for the past hour, i.e. you've got clear performance measures, you've got them in your distribution agreement, you've had the open and honest communication, so you've had monthly reports, you've had meetings. As you were saying, with the leading indicators, you start to see actually that those leading indicators many months before the sales start failing, you can see there's problems. So the first thing is that you try and cut that off at the pass, and then you obviously try to improve the situation. You genuinely try to work it together, but then there's obviously red flags that start popping up. That if that they may well, either one of you may be paying lip service to your relationship. And I think if you've got a decent relationship, you tend to know, and the things that will pop up in terms of, from my point of view, when you're looking at a failing relationship, that one side is not telling the whole truth. That the distributor might not be telling the reality about why sales are bad, or that they have sales that they don't really have. and they don't know customers as well as they said they do. And again, it's very easy to pick it up, because if you're speaking to them on a regular basis and you're going out and field with it, you'll start to see these things very clearly. If you have poorly trained salespeople, or there's not enough salespeople, or poor marketing materials, there's a whole raft of red flags which would start to give you an idea that actually this isn't really working. But those lead indicators around sell-through and different, not sell-through, sorry, accounts that they're speaking to, pipeline reports, etc., would start to give you an indication. And then I think all you can do is you work as much as you can. But as Paul said, you factor those things into your distribution agreement. So the consequence of not achieving X, Y, and Z are these things. So you're not doing anything because you're being personal about it. You're just having a conversation around what you've already agreed at the outset. You're not delivering that. So we've tried to work on it. It's still not worked. We need to go our separate ways, and I think that's the easiest way to do it.
Perfect. Thanks, Hakeem. Appreciate that. We moved at a pretty quick pace today. Got through the questions that you had all submitted in advance of this presentation. Going to wrap up with a couple quick things, including Paul, Hakeem, and Serge's contact info coming up in the next slide. We do have a couple of webinars coming up. One is around QMS, Quality Management Systems. That's December 13th. That is a joint presentation with Qualio and Rook Quality Systems. That one I'm really interested to get out there. I think it's a great topic. We started to do a whole bunch on market entry. We did a series on the US. We are doing one on Germany on December 14th. So that's with Comms Consulting, amazing German firm that helps companies go to market in Germany. So they're going to be sharing some of what we talked about today as the upfront work in going to the German medtech market. I will also just provide contact information here. So Hakeem, Paul, Serge have all been kind enough to share this. We will send it to you afterwards. They are all looking for partners. They have their own criteria, but certainly feel free to reach out to them afterwards as well. The questions in the chat, my apologies, we didn't get to it, but all the questions we did today were actually your questions as well. So we will do a summary of the remaining questions and include that in the follow-up with some thoughts from our team in the panel on those questions. So I want to thank Paul, Serge, Hakeem for your time today. Really appreciate it. Angela on our team for putting this together. I am going to stay on for a couple minutes here for those of you who'd like to see the platform and how it can help you with actually all four of these pillars. I'm going to do that in about 7 minutes total. So if you feel like staying on for another 7 minutes, I will show that to you. And if not, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, panel. We really appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day. I'm going to switch over to the platform now very quickly. So the 4 pillars we talked about today: discover markets, understand markets before you go to them. That's this first piece. The second one is about finding and connecting with great partners. And then the collaboration piece really touches on the other two aspects or pillars we talked about, which is laying the foundation for great partnerships and partner management collaboration. So very quickly on market discovery, we cover market data in 105 countries. So whether that's a country like Saudi Arabia and you want to drill in and learn more about that market before you approach Saudi Arabian distributors, we provide over 800 data points on each market, including regulatory, to Paul's comment earlier in the presentation today, assets and employment, how many beds, how many hospitals, how many surgeons, how many clinical specialists, how many physicians, utilization rates, surgical procedures by clinical area, diagnostic exams, etc. We do that on 105 countries. This is my personal view of the world in myCaribou, where these green or teal countries are active for me, and the purple ones are markets that I am targeting, learning about, and starting to seek distributors. From a distribution point of view, obviously, there'd be a different take on this. The second piece is finding partners. So how do you find and select? Hakeem mentioned they're using the platform to do this, as is Paul's company. And the way this basically works is there are roughly 44,000 company profiles on the platform. If you are looking to go to market in a particular market, let's say we want to find a distributor or a sales agent, and let's use Brazil as an example, and I will use product category of cardiovascular. I could have, though, to the earlier conversation, focused more on call points. Who does the distributor sell to? Do they sell to cardiac cath labs? Do they sell to cardiac surgeons, et cetera? But I'll keep it fairly straightforward here. This is going to be a list of 93 distributors in Brazil, all of whom are, in this case, headquartered in Brazil, sell cardio products in Brazil. I can get a quick view of this particular distributor. I can go into a more detailed view. I can open up their webpage. I can learn more about what other products they're representing today, categories that is. And then ultimately, when I'm ready, I can connect to them. And when I do that, this is from their perspective, they want to know a little bit about me. And they've actually asked 3 questions here, including, do your products have Anvisa certification, which would be important going into Brazil. And ultimately, when I'm ready to, I can submit that, and that would be a connection request to that distributor in Brazil. What we're finding, though, is this concept called opportunity posts is actually driving way more partnerships than just the direct kind of outreach to potential partners through the interface. And I'm going to show you in the live platform some examples here. These are real opportunity posts, and they are posted by manufacturers and distributors. And the idea here is, for example, in this case, a leading distributor in India looking for products and technology to add to its portfolio. That is going to be attractive to any manufacturer with complementary products that would be selling into, wanting to sell into India. You can see it has a low match score for me. That's because their products don't match mine. And I'm not looking at India perhaps in this case. But you can do this as a manufacturer. You can do it as a distributor. Here's another example, seeking cardiac anesthesia and perfusion distributors in France, the UK, and Germany. And so if I was to look at this particular opportunity, this is a Canadian manufacturer looking to go to France, Germany, and the UK. They describe their products. They can also attach product fact sheets if they wanted to. And what happens with these opportunity posts is that they get promoted, and we typically see anywhere from sort of 3 to 20 interested partners that will connect to you and start to communicate with you about their potential value in being either your supplier or your distributor. So these opportunity posts have really taken off for us. We're seeing tremendous success with them. It really allows you to say, I'm looking for X and I need somebody who's interested in doing that with me. And it's been a great thing for both distributors looking for suppliers as well as manufacturers looking for distributors. The last thing I'll show you is just partner management collaboration. So this is my view of my distribution channel. So in markets like Argentina, all the way down to Uruguay, I have various partners. So I've got a couple partners in Canada, got a couple in the US. I can manage my sales forecast across all of these partners. I can share files, I can share discussions, I can even set metrics and objectives with each of them. They can only see what your partnership with them. In other words, Galen Medical in Canada would only see the relationship with you. They don't know that you're partnered with all these other distributors around the world. They only see effectively this line. And they only see that line when you decide to invite them in. So for example, in this case, I have invited the distributor, Brad, and all these people on my team to work on this relationship together, on that specific partnership. The power of all this is you can actually go into each of these, set objectives with each of your partners. You can put sales forecasts in. You can have discussions and share files. And the great thing about it is, either from a distributor side or a manufacturer side, there are going to be times when you want to communicate with everyone and do it very quickly, or a subset of your distributors or partners and do it quickly. So for example, I could say, I've got a new product update. I want to send a file. So I'm going to share a file with them, describe it, and that would actually send that or connect that to all my partners that I chose here. Similarly, I might want to say something as simple as, hey, I'm going to Medica. If you're going to be there, we'd love to connect while you're there. And that starts a dialogue with all of my partners globally, which would show up, as you can see here, in these open conversations between myself and each of my partners. So the power of this is both for distributors who manage suppliers and suppliers who manage distributors. And you can manage those partners. You can also decide to collaborate with those partners. And it really addresses those last two pillars we talked about around managing, collaborating, setting expectations, et cetera, with each partner. I'm going to show you just a quick example of goal setting. So in my partnership with XYZ Distributor in the UK in this case, I can actually set specific objectives with them, and we together can manage those objectives in the market so that we're really on the same page in terms of that as well. And so that's an example of something we could review on a quarterly basis together, a monthly basis, et cetera. All of that rolls up to your partner dashboard. All that rolls up to your performance dashboards, where you can see how your interactions with your partners are working, succeeding, both in terms of some of those trailing indicators like sales, as well as some of the leading indicators of your objectives that you set with those partners. So again, just to be really clear, 4 main aspects to the platform. So market discovery, finding and connecting with new partners, collaborating and managing partnerships, and then ultimately your dashboarding capabilities to roll that up. It is free to join. I'm just going to pause sharing momentarily. It's free to join. You can try all that functionality for 30 days, after which you can then decide whether to be just a listing on the platform or a subscribing customer using that capability on a go-forward basis. On that note, that's it for us. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate staying on for the demo.